the warm-up.
Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so there is a stapler up here. I want everyone to staple their warm-up to their other warm-up sheet. Pass the stapler around. There is a stapler at Rachel's desk. There's a stapler up here. Staple, pass the stapler around. Because I know I'm going to walk by it and trip 10,000 times.
I like the idea here.
Is this like triple?
It is a triple link. Okay.
Yeah, but how do we know which shape smells?
So if I can get people to be quiet, I'm going to cover this form up with you. So, in triples, does anyone know what a triple is and where triples came from? Star Trek. So, in triples, short hair is recessive. I'm going to do little h. So, what would be dominant? Purple noses. Sorry, no, purple eyes. Purple eyes, little e, not purple. Big E. Pink nose, little n, and I think later on I talk about a green nose. Big N. So, in a heterozygous, how would I write heterozygous female? How would I normally write it? For anything. Heterozygous female. Big little, big little, big little, right? But if I read this, if a heterozygous wild, what does that mean? Normal, quote unquote, normally it's normal. Female who gets the pink nose from her mama. So I'm going to say she got the little n from here. What does that mean? Got the big N from here. And purple eyes and short hair trait from daddy. Purple eyes and short hair from daddy. She marries a long hair, green nose, purple eyed male. So long hair would be big H, purple eyes, little, and green nose. Yes, I'm putting the letters in a different order. It really does not matter. Okay. So, hopefully you're not just copying mine, you're also looking at yours and trying to determine how I got that. Because I will not be there on the day of the test, which is the 10th.
You just the bottom one.
Yeah, it should be a little one.
The one big.
Oh, thank you. So the test is Thursday. 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 I say this so that there's no confusion. And I'm not gonna get text. Well, I was told it's the following week.
See, this time you're actually saying the right date. Last time you said it.
Other people heard me say the correct date.
Yes,
Did you already go over what everything is?
No, and I'm not going to yet. Okay. So, now, to talk about traits, I'm going to say this is a female. I'm going to say Big N has green nose. Big E, so not purple. And Big H, long hair. This one is female, green nose, purple eyes, and long hair. This is male, pink nose, not purple, and long. Male, green, purple, and short. So, what would you answer for what are the genotypes of the offspring?
So if I already did the transcript, you have to say it again.
Yes.
There's just 3 options. Right?
Wrong. There are 4 options. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. What are the phenotypes? 1, 2, 3, 4.
For this, we wouldn't have to do ratio, right?
You could do a ratio, but it's easy. 1 to 1 to 1 to 1.
Oh,
You're not going to talk about any of the other oddball, any of the other combinations.
Oh.
This is one of those cases that I'd be like, there's no way I'm going to ask you a genotype ratio because that would take you a very long time. Okay. So now, in a genetic cross, we get 322 green nose, long hair, purple eyes. Green nose, long hair, green nose, purple eyes, long hair. So 322 is these. I get 355 of these. 402 of the green nose male. And I get 300 of these. Miss Fair, where did you get that information?
3 of them say green. Oh, wait.
From the bottom, it gives you that information. So, what is my observed versus my expected?
So observed is the orange one.
So, I'll just put down for A, because this is individual A, 355. Now, why am I separating males from females here? Because it's a sex-linked trait, because there's X's and Y's. If it wasn't sex-linked trait, and so green, not purple, no, green, purple, long. None of these would match, actually. But if it was not sex-linked, and some of those matched, I'd clump them all together. Does that make sense? Okay, how am I going to figure my expected out? Add them up. So you can go 25% of this number. Go here.
Roughly 345.
About 345. Why am I going 25% for each of those?
It's a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio.
It's a 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 ratio.
Miss Fair, when you divide the total by 4, you get like a decimal, so then you round all of them up, or like round 2 up and round 2 down, so you don't
Just
have.
keep the decimal. It's fine. Even if it's not a full individual.
Just 3 parts all.
What if my ratio was 9:3:3:1?
Then you do the total times 9 or
Do the total times 9/16. Does that make sense? Okay. So, you guys, give me a minute. Okay, you probably will need a sheet of paper for pedigree notes. And karyotypes.
So you need to like fill in like the crib value, the chi-square value, the user trees, and all that.
You need to be able to do that for the test.
Oh, yes.
Am I going to go in there to warm up and say, you didn't give me crap? No. I might just be grumpy, but no. No. So the mom would set her that test, right? That doesn't mean that. Yes. Make sure you staple this sheet to your warm-up sheet, because if you don't, then you're going to come out on the day of the warm-up, I lost it! And that's pretty much how many of you sound.
So are we skipping it down the warm-up sheet then, since the which stays normal?
Well, no, because you still have a learning target. Okay. So, let's get started with pedigrees. You'll probably need a sheet of paper for some notes. That's your choice. If we've finished and you want to leave early, that's your choice. If we haven't finished and you want to leave early, that's your choice too.
Why is it what we do? Why do we not just like...
But what I'm saying is, if we haven't finished, that's your choice. No, Farrar, it's up to teacher discussion. Like if you've been real brass, that'd be my choice. But at the AP level, it's your choice. Okay.
Wait, that means it's not...
Okay. So, pedigree. Pedigree is not dog food. There is a brand of dog food named pedigree. Yes, I know. What I'm talking about with pedigree is it shows a record of a family of an individual. So it shows how one trait has pass through a family. You can, normally a pedigree deals with only one trait, and you're going to watch how blue eyes has passed down through a family, or hemophilia, or sickle cell anemia, or even just widow's peak versus non-widow's peak. This is useful for a large family and for a family that you have a lot of details on. So, for example, my mom's family, I can go back to my great-great-great-grandparents. I have the family tree, right? I can get information from most of those individuals. My dad's family, I don't have anything other than his grandparents. I've got nothing. Even his sibling, I have no information about my dad's sibling. So my dad's family would not be a good choice for me to make a pedigree with. Some families can go back 7, 8, 10 generations. If you look at Queen Elizabeth and you watch how sickle cell, hemophilia has passed through the aristocracy, you can actually see where it actually appeared in the aristocracy of basically the world, and it even includes the czars of Russia.
So would hemophilia just sort of like appear? Would it just be
So hemophilia it's a random mutation that can appear. But most of the time, if you're hemophilic, it's because your parents had hemophilia, or one of your parents was a carrier, or whatnot.
So why in royal families, why is it so much more common?
Because, and we'll get to that, I promise.
Are the things you picked up recommended?
I'm not going to say right now because, well, all the stuff you picked up is recommended. I will say that. It's all recommended. Some of the stuff we're going to go through a little bit more, some of the stuff we won't. Now, why do we do pedigrees? Because I can't say, Danica, you have, okay, Danica, you're not a good example. Josephine, you have brown eyes. I want to know if you're heterozygous or homozygous, so I want you to have a child with a blue-eyed person, because if your child is brown eyes, then you're probably homozygous dominant. But if your child is blue eyes, then you're definitely heterozygous. I can't do that, right? With dogs, I can do that. With cats, I can do that. With mice, I can do that. It's not ethical to say, hey, have this new baby just to find out what your genes are, right? So it's a way of working backwards. Some people are like, what? Yeah, I'm telling her to have a kid right now. Mom is okay with that. Sorry if am I abusing you?
Oh, I'm recording. No.
Okay, so today genetic engineering, they're going to use these tools also to look at genetic diseases, and a good friend of mine, I'm hoping I can get her to come in and talk in my genetics class. She is a genetic counselor. So she is a genetic counselor, and I'm hoping she talks about the rare diseases that she studies.
She's coming by.
I am going to try to arrange it. I'm not saying it's happened. I'm saying I'm trying. And what she does is she talks about the fact that this disease runs in your family. So what is the chances your child could come down with it? What do you need to do to be prepared? So when we were pregnant with Raiden, they tested me to see if I was a carrier for thalassemia. Because if both of us were carriers of thalassemia, then there was a good chance Raiden would be born with a huge disability on him, right? And so we would have to make a decision at that point about pregnancy and about what we would have to do with that, poor child who has a lot of issues. Luckily, we didn't have to come to that because I'm not a carrier. So how we write pedigrees is with open square is normally a male. Closed squares are normally affected males. Open circles, females. Closed circles are affected females. A line between individuals is considered marriage, or, well, historically it's in marriage. Now we say anytime there could be a chance of a little baby. And then you get a gift in 9 months. A gift that keeps giving.
Children are not gifts.
And, well, the child keeps giving gifts in terms of poop and vomit and diarrhea and
Maybe we should just like not have kids.
No,
That's the best choice.
I love my kids. Danica has heard me say how much I love my kids.
Oh, she does love her kids.
I do love my kids, but every once in a while I really want to just get rid of them.
Turn them into
I have all okay, so, yes. Okay, now, guys. Sometimes we don't know the gender of a child. Now that could be 2 different reasons. One, it could be a preterm birth that's a stillborn that they didn't notate what gender it is. It could be that, hey, so your uncle, it was married to so-and-so, and they had a child, but we haven't really talked to that family. How did you walk here so fast? I'm impressed. So in the case of this one, it'd be like, you know that uncle that you know is related to you, and he has a child, but we never really talked to him, and we just know he had a child? That's the case that you'd have the diamond. Does that make sense?
Not really. I don't really understand exactly.
It's a person that you're related to that you don't know what gender their child was, because you don't associate with them. Does that make sense?
Like you have a cousin named
Yeah, I have a cousin.
Carson, but you don't know if they're boy or girl.
Yeah, well, and that can happen too. Okay, so if it's heterozygous, then you'd write it as, did I get to that?
Oh, sorry.
Manya, what are you doing? You causing trouble again? She is, isn't she? Referral? That's what I thought.
That's fair. How come we never did the diamonds in genetics?
Because the
Because
diamond
there's
is not
stuff
really.
in genetics that goes are more in depth than what Okay, so heterozygous. Sometimes we notate heterozygous. This is only sometimes, and you notate it by a bullseye or half colored in. Most of the time, if I'm looking at, I'm going to go back to Josephine. Poor Josephine, you are being tortured today. If I look at Josephine, I see brown eyes. I can't tell by looking at her if she is dominant or dominant recessive, right? So I just assume she's showing brown eyes. Sometimes I know that she is a heterozygote, and I would notate that in the pedigree. Now, a stillbirth or a spontaneous abortion, aka a miscarriage, would be drawn like this, actually this way. So it's a small little dot. It's one of those that they had a child, but we don't know what the gender was. This is also a case where you could do a diamond if they don't know the gender. But this does not mean that necessarily this child had the disorder. It just means that they had a pregnancy, it didn't survive.
So they wouldn't differentiate between like circle and square? Like,
No. If they don't, a lot of times with early pregnancies, they don't know.
So what's the point of putting them on the karyotype if you don't?
Because if a woman is having multiple stillbirths or multiple miscarriages, there might be a genetic reason for that. And then we do a pedigree to figure out, oh wait, it's caused by a lethal disease. If they died from the disorder, you're going to mark a line through it or a plus sign. I don't understand why a plus. I would say a negative would make more sense. But
so this is dying from?
That's dying from the disease. Now, if you look at Queen Elizabeth's pedigree, and it goes back at least like 8 to 9 generations. Obviously, her great grandmother is not still alive.
She could be. She's kind of a mutant.
That's true. But let's assume that number of greatness is not still alive, right? We're not going to slash everyone. We just slash the ones that actually died from the disease, right? Although sometimes I do want to slash my father. That was kind of neat.
On recording.
I told him the other day how I told you guys how my sense of humor came from him and that he's hilarious.
Yeah, so there was
Right?
an invitation.
Hate my students. Okay, so the ones, so when we're looking at pedigrees, the ones that are colored in are normally the trait we're looking for. So if we're going to do a blue-eyed pedigree, the ones colored in are probably, we're going to say that's the one that we're looking for. Does that make sense? It gets very tricky. A marriage with 5 kids, you always write the eldest child to the youngest. So circle, so there was an oldest daughter, then there were 3 sons, and then there was a youngest daughter. Again, it says marriage, but in reality, it's any type of sexual relationship that ends up with a child. Now, divorces, I forgot to talk about divorces last period. If there is a divorce that had children, what they do is they do this, and they say that here there were, whatever the children were. Does that make sense? Sometimes they'll do a slash to say that, like, that marriage dissolved, but they can show extensions this way. Twins. So this situation is a set of monozygotic twins or identical twins. This is a fraternal twin because it came from 2 eggs, 2 sperm to make 2 babies. This one came from 1 egg, 1 sperm to make 2 babies. So there's little tricks when you're doing pedigrees. Yeah. Last period, someone asked about adoption. That's interesting. So if they adopted a child first, a boy, let's just say, what they do is you do a dashed line. Why would you do a dashed line for adoption? It's not a biological child, right? But it is still a child. So if you see, and I am a total nerd, on the Star Wars pedigree, you can see how Luke was adopted by Lars and Baru, and Leia was adopted by the Organos. Now, by the way, before anyone yells at me, this is by doctrine, which means it's by the books. This does not follow what the movies talk about. So someone's going to say, but that's not technically true because I'm like, no, this is by the books. I spent 2 days doing this.
Guys, don't mess with this
Are most of the comments in the
No, long. Okay. Already talked about this. I'm gonna go. Okay. I already talked about married.
For the heterozygous one, is that shown whenever it's heterozygous, whether it's dominant or recessive, or only recessive?
Only if it's a recessive trait, because it's showing carriers.
Okay.
Okay, multiple offspring. I said about the twins. How do you differentiate between a brother and a sister and a husband and wife? Is there a line between the two? Then it's a husband and wife or sexual relationship. Okay, this is okay. Guys. Okay, now let me speak. So sometimes, for example, this is where the aristocracy comes into play. So if you were Queen Elizabeth's great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, and you, or great-grandfather, and you have a child, you don't want your riches to go to some peasant, right? So you are going to have them marry some other aristocracy, around the world, hopefully gaining you an ally rather than a foe, right? And some money. So quite often there was cousin interbreeding, cousin marriages. In some cultures, it's more common to have marriages between closer relatives. I'm not saying siblings.
Like a whole family.
Well, and then, then you have relative dating. Remember my joke about relative dating? It's what happens in West Virginia. Wasn't that one of the best? No, so incest is between siblings. So, you would do the same thing, but that's not the point. Why is it more common for a deleterious or a recessive trait to show up between siblings than it would be for relatives?
No genetic diversity.
There's very low genetic diversity, right? Okay, so did that answer your question about hemophilia and aristocracy?
Yes.
Okay, we talk about generations as the Roman numerals, Roman numeral 1, and normally we would number this as 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, and so on. I talked about the monozygotic versus the dizygotic egg.
Well, Miss Rose, Roman numeral starts from the F1 generation, right?
Why am I talking?
Did you teach her?
Why do I have to repeat myself when I just said what I said? Because you were talking. Okay, so Roman numerals, generation 1, generation 2, generation 3. It's written in order of children. So this was the first son, the second son, the third daughter, the fourth daughter, the fifth daughter. Okay, this one here is saying that they are somewhat closely related. And if I talk about how many children were born between 1, 1 and 1, 2, how many would I say? How many children did 1, 1 and 1, 2 have?
4, 5.
5. Why 5 and not 6? That one is married in.
Can you go over what wild type means again? Like that just means.
Wild type normally means dominant, but it can mean recessive. Wild type is the normal.
So it just. Oh, okay, it's the normal.
It's the normal.
So does that mean that person married in before the 6 child was had?
No, that's a good question. Okay, for timing, I never thought about that. So this 5 married in at some point. It does not mean that he married or she married in before this one was born. Just means at some point this one got married. That's a good point.
It'll shift over depending on who married, the number?
No, so this one here, when she gets married, we would just add a.
Yeah, but if
This one gets married.
Would it be like 4 and then the 4 was switched to 5 and 5?
Oh, you mean the number? Okay. Oh, I see the number wise. Huh. Never thought about that. Yeah, this would be 1, 2, 3. This one now would be 4. This one would now be 5, 6, and so on. Good point. God, you're getting good questions. Okay. So how many individuals are showing the disorder?
501 dead.
5 showed the disorder. How many died from the disorder? 1. How many are still living today? I can tell you these 4 are probably still living now. Maybe they all died. That'd be really sad. But I'm saying this is the only one that I know died from the disease. I can't say about the living or death about the rest. Okay, so and I think that was the question I was supposed to ask. Okay, number of boys in the that were born to the first generation?
4.
4. Number of girls?
1.
1. How many of generation 2 were married with children? Which is a really good TV show, Married with Children.
How many generations?
So, do pedis always show sex linked, or is there autosomal too?
There's autosomal and sex-linked. Okay. So there's always 2 questions you have to ask when you're looking at a pedigree. If the teacher, if the problem does not tell you it's an autosomal dominant trait, it's a sex-linked recessive trait, you have to figure it out. There's 2 questions. 1, is it dominant or recessive? And 2, is it autosomal or sex-linked? In theory, you could do a pedigree with codominance or incomplete dominance, but that'd get really messy. I can't even imagine doing one with multiple alleles, although you could do different colors. So in theory, you could do that. That'd be really painful. Be interesting though.
But the exam would never make this through.
The AP exam would not, and my exam I would not. But these are the 2 questions you need to ask in order to answer the questions. Now, if they tell you it's autosomal dominant, take it. It's autosomal dominant. If they say that it's autosomal recessive, take it. If they don't tell you, then you got to figure it out. And sometimes there's more than one answer.
How would you know if it's dominant or recessive?
Well, if you wait for 2 seconds, I'll tell you. Okay, actually, I'll tell you right now. Okay, recessive may skip generations. So these 2 are showing my dominant trait. This one here is showing recessive. And that tells me that this one has to be heterozygous, right? They're carrying. So if it's a recessive trait, like blue eyes, this is the blue-eyed individual, right? This one is brown eyes. This one is brown eyes. I just did a problem like that with my freshman. One of my students said, I have brown eyes, my parents have brown eyes, but my sister has blue eyes. Well, she adopted, and my first answer is, I really can't answer that because I don't know your family. But genetically, it's possible, right? Now, I will tell you, in a friend of mine in college, she was in a professor's class, and the professor was going through genetics and said, okay, so blue eyes is recessive. And she's like, well, so I have brown eyes, my parents have blue eyes. The professor just looked at her, sorry, you're adopted, and went on. Ran out of the room crying. Because that's how she found out that she was adopted. Yeah. Now, in this case here, because it's a dominant trait, I would show it with dominance. Hold on. Now, what does that mean about this one here? So, both of the parents have to be carriers. Well, would I call them carriers?
No. But they're expressing it.
They're expressing it. So, if it's a dominant trait, if a child has it, a parent has to have it. If it's a dominant trait, if a child has it, the parent has to have it. So there's our 2 rules for dominant versus recessive. Yeah.
Couldn't she have technically not been adopted if there was a genetic mutation?
Well, and that's the next level that you'd have to talk about. But, yeah, so that professor might have just caused a lot of problems. What is your problem?
I left my laptop in my first period. Just remember. Yeah.
So if the disorder is dominant, if a child has it, a parent has to have it. If a child has it, a parent has to have it. There is the exception where it's a random mutation, like my student Lizzie, who's a dwarf, a chondroplasic dwarf, and her parents are both normal size. And remember that normal size is little d, little d, little d, little d, but she was so it's a random mutation. Most of us in this room are all recessive for 5 fingers. Frau Wright's daughter, Marika, was born with a 6th finger. And that is a random mutation. Both parents are born with 5 fingers. Random mutation that the child is born with it. So it does appear, but it's rare. Recessive, it may jump generations. It may skip generations. So this one here, what would I say? Recessive or dominant? Recessive. Why? And use proper terminology.
Because it can skip generations.
You got to tell me on the pedigree.
It skips generations.
Okay, we can't pay attention to the fact that it skipped generation 2 because this one might be totally colored in, and then it's not. What's the key then? Right?
Generation 2, 3, and 4 are not affected when they had an affected child.
So 2, 3, and 2, 4 were not affected, but 3, 1 was affected. That's what I want to see on FRQs. Not just 3 and 4 had a child and the child was affected. I want to see 2, 3, 2, 4.
Does that mean that, like, the male is carrying it?
So, well, we'll talk about dominant and recessive in a second. Or sorry, about autosomal versus sex-linked in a second. In this case, if it was autosomal, both of them have to be carrying it. Right? Does that make sense? Dominant traits never skip generation. Okay, this one here, is it a dominant or a recessive? And this one can give you the answer immediately if you're using this thing. Recessive. Why?
Because you wouldn't show the heterozygous if you didn't care about whether or not it was carried.
There wouldn't be any carriers in a dominant trait. Right?
What about for X activation?
For pedigrees, we don't talk about those. How many individuals have this tongue rolling trait?
6.
Wrong.
1.
All 1.
1. The full one.
That's in the full colored in.
Oh, yeah.
How many of them are carrying the allele, at least carrying the allele?
5. 6. Well,
So 6 are at least have one allele. Does that make sense? Now, this is true in my family, and I hate it. So, being a tongue roller is dominant. Being a non-tongue roller is recessive. I am the only one in my family that cannot roll their tongue.
What do you mean, roll? Like twist it, or just like
Someone do it.
like a taco?
There, look, like a taco. Yeah. You can. That's a genetic trait.
It's a muscle, right?
Now, so here's the thing, guys, this is something that you can train yourself to do if you have that ability. Now, just take your hands, okay? Go, brush your hands. What thumb is on top?
Right.
Left. If it is right over left, you are dominant.
Wait, what?
If it's right over left, you're dominant. Now, flip your thumbs. It feels weird.
So wait, I'm recessive then, because I'm left to the right.
Right over left is dominant. The other way is recessive. Okay, so that one there. So which hand you write with? That is more than just genetic. There is a genetic component to it, but it's also like training.
My brother was a lefty.
There is a genetic component to it, like it's influenced by genetics. Now, years ago, like when my mom was in school, my mom was a left-hander, and by the way, left-handers were going to hell according to that time frame. So they taped her left hand behind her back and forced her to write with her right hand. And she never was able to function this way. And she ended up, for the rest of her life, with a left-hander, but boy, was she told that she was going to the bad place.
How people can become ambidextrous?
Now, ambidextrous, this is why it's considered a genetic influence trait, because it's not 100% one way or the other, because some people are ambidextrous. Already answered this, already answered that. Okay, so autosomal or dominant or recessive? Dominant or recessive?
I would say dominant.
Justify.
Oh, wait, no.
Generation 2, 8, Generation 2, 8,
Okay, Yassine. Guys, Yassine, say it again.
Generation 2, 8, and 9 have a
Generation 2, 8, and 2, 9 are unaffected, but 3, 17 is affected.
Also, one
So
of
it
two
is recessive.
are all recessive, or like unaffected.
But,
Yeah, but it's the generation.
okay, I see what you're saying there. I see what you're saying there. Okay. But that could be by chance. Because if it were dominant, let's pretend world it's dominant. This one would be big R space, little, little. By chance, all of those are little, little.
But, okay,
Right?
yeah.
It's probability reality. Now, but because of the fact of those two, because of this issue, we know it has to be a recessive trait. Okay, this one here gives you the answer, which it really, I wish I could get a better picture so it doesn't show you the answer. Dominant or recessive? Why?
the parent has a trait.
I'm gonna say
If a
recessive.
child has the trait, a parent always has it. If a child has it, a parent has it. If a child has it, a parent has it. It also says big A versus little a. So it gives you the answer. Who's the first individual with the trait on the pedigree chart?
Generation 1, 1.
Yeah, 1.
1-1 is the first to happen. Who did individual 7 from generation 3 inherit the trait from?
Probably one.
2, 4, or his mom?
Wouldn't it be mom and dad? Because it's a recessive thing.
No, it's a dominant trait.
Oh, why is it little? Why is it little?
So it's showing that it's showing the dominant, big A.
Oh, okay. So majority just happens to be recessive.
Yeah. This is an example of fingers, right?
Yeah.
Most of us are looking like this. There's only a few individuals, and I've taught a couple of them, that are colored in.
You taught somebody with 6 fingers?
Yeah, I did. Actually, this is really interesting. So, I taught her freshman year and senior year. During her, about 2 years later, I taught the next sister, and the next sister was like, well, you remember so-and-so? I'm like, yeah. So she was polydactyl. She had an extra finger. I'm like, I knew her for 4 years, and I never even realized.
Wait, was it on both hands or one?
Just one hand for her.
Somebody hit it away.
So it's on both hands?
Marika, I don't remember if Marika's on both, it was on both hands or just one. Yeah.
If you have 6 fingers, can you come out of anywhere? Or does it have
Okay,
to come out?
so, guys, so there's actually 3 different forms of polydactyl. One is having a little piece on this side that's non-functional. One is having a little piece on this side that's non-functional. And then there is a group of family that has 6 fingers, and it's totally functional. but that's a rarity. Rarity is that it's totally functional.
I know, like, royal families, like, the more they, like, had children with their other family members, the worse the genetics got. How did it, like, get so bad?
Okay, so if you ever, so there are certain traits, and I'm trying to remember the name. Even Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun had an abnormally large head and an abnormally small face because there was so much interbreeding, especially in the Egypt aristocracy. And so if you look at the recreations of Tutankhamun's corpse or his skeleton, if you look at the recreations of him, he looks really weird. And the reason why is because every time they interbred, they got more and more of those recessive traits showing up.
Oh, okay, so is it possible that it also just increases the chance of, like, this, like, mutations happening?
Not really increases chance of mutations, but you're showing more and more common mutations.
So the only reason, like, breeding between, like, family members is bad is because the recessive traits show up more.
You have a greater chance of sharing similar recessive traits, and therefore those recessive traits might be more expressed.
But so other than that, there's nothing that makes it, like, so that the people as they go down the family tree, like, get worse and worse. Like,
No, it's just less genetic diversity, and so it's not going to be beneficial at the species level.
Is it possible that if the family tree had, like, no real bad recessive traits or anything, that, like, they could just, inbreed and there would be, like, no...
In theory, but the chances of that happening is pretty rare. And think about the Amish population, guys. So the Amish population started out with very few individuals. It was called the founder's effect. They started out with very few individuals, and they migrated to a new area, and they started having kids, but because now they weren't closely related, but their kids became closely related, right? That's why there are certain genetic traits that are more common in the Amish population. Just because they have continuously had a small genetic diversity. Okay, so here's an example of my friend's cat who is polydactyl. They're so cute.
Little Tobies.
Okay, So, is it autosomal or, is it dominant or recessive? We haven't even got halfway through. We gotta keep going.
Dominant.
Okay,
Wait.
1255.
Dominant.
Okay, so this is one of those cases that we would have to play and try it out. So we're gonna guess dominant. So big R, this would be little, this would be a big R, this is little. What does this tell me about? Okay. I know this one has to be recessive.
so it's obviously dominant. Yeah, it could work.
Okay, well, okay, so that's what I just heard. It could work. Okay, this could work as a dominant trait. Does that mean we're going to stick with dominant traits?
No.
We got to double check. So if it was recessive, this one would be little, big little, big little. Does it work for recessive?
Yeah. No.
Where? Tell me where.
Yeah, both work.
All those are, I know, but this is what you have to do on problems. Does it work? Yes. This is a case where the family is not big enough to give me the data. I would need more children, more generations to determine if it's dominant or recessive. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, this one here, pretty simple. That one's definitely recessive. Probably dominant.
Recessive.
Definitely recessive.
Yeah.
Okay, Brooke, tell me why, using terms.
3, 8, 9 are both unaffected, but 14 is affected.
Okay,
Sorry,
so,
I meant to say 8 and 9. I got confused.
okay, so generation 2, 8, generation 2, 9 are unaffected, but generation 3, 14 is. So it has to be recessive. Now, we can go through and figure out the genotypes. Who else do I know for sure? 7 has to be heterozygous.
Even both, one is, both 8 and 9 have to be heterozygous.
Both 8 and 9 have to be heterozygous. I know all of these have to be heterozygous. Why? Because the parent shows a recessive trait. I know these guys are heterozygous. Now, what about the last 2? What does probability tell me about number 1? Okay, it has to be what? Has to be heterozygous. Is that true?
Actually, most of it
That's a child, that's a child, that's a child, that's a child.
So,
So, probability, this one here is big H, right? Reality, yes, it could be heterozygous. I don't know which. But probability, reality.
If this like were applied to migraines and no migraines, that would mean that my dad also has like migraines even though he doesn't show it.
No, that means that the no migraine trait is more powerful and it's hiding the migraine trait.
Okay, so it's a bully thing.
Yeah, it's sort of.
He's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad doesn't suffer from migraines, but I'm not.
There's no way you can look at someone's DNA and know for sure if they're heterozygous or homozygous.
You'd have to run a gel
Gel
electrophoresis. DNA fingerprinting. Okay, guys, we're not even halfway through this. And we have another one to go through that you're going to have to learn on your own if I don't get there. If you don't want me to teach it, I can, and you can watch. Okay, so step 2 is it the autosomal or is it sex-linked? Are there any male carriers? If there are no male carriers, how do you get your letters in the mail? If there's male carriers, then it's autosomal. Yes. If there are no male carriers, then you can't get your mail. It's one of my favorite jokes. You guys, come on. Come on. Are the affected ones or most of the affected ones males? Then yes, and it's probably sex-linked. There is a rule 3 that I don't have on here and I need to add to this PowerPoint. Every year I say that to myself and every year I forget. I have my note here. The rule 3, if it's sex-linked and a daughter shows it, her daddy also shows it. If it's sex-linked and a daughter shows it, her daddy shows it. Why would her daddy have to show it? Because she gets 2 X's, one from mama, and she gets the other one from daddy. And if it's sex-linked recessive, she had to have gotten it from daddy. Yes. if it's sex-linked recessive.
This is sex into the next to the same, right?
If it was sex-linked Y, then there'd be no females that would have it. Okay, so,
That would mean that like men will get wiped out by like one.
well, there's no lethal alleles on the line.
Yeah, but I'm saying like if they're potentially less.
Yes. Okay, so, first question, dominant or recessive? Probably dominant. Sex-linked or autosomal?
Sex.
No, autosomal.
We're saying autosomal dominant? Is that what our class guess is? So,
It's autosomal.
autosomal dominant, if a daughter has it, her dad has it. If a daughter has it, her dad. So we just said that was sex-linked dominant, or sex-linked recessive. Sex-linked recessive. If a daughter has it, her dad has to have it, if it's sex-linked recessive. So it cannot be sex-linked recessive.
So are we right?
Well,
Why is it not autosomal?
because I haven't gotten a chance to do that yet. Because I got distracted. Change colors. Autosomal dominant. How do we try it?
You start with the lower.
So little. This one.
Has to be little r. And same with the other. Same thing.
Are all those possible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably autosomal dominant. Does that make sense?
I thought you just said it's sex-linked.
No, it can't be sex-linked because sex-linked recessive because this one daughter has it, her daddy does not. They have to get it from the daddy.
What about autosomal recessive?
Okay, well, let's try autosomal recessive. If you want to leave now, please just go. Because I don't want to talk over you. So, autosomal recessive. So, if it was recessive, that means this one is up there. Uh-oh, we have a problem. What's the problem?
I don't see it.
What's the problem?
There's no.
There's a problem.
Yeah.
As in,
Not great.
it could be autosomal recessive or autosomal dominant. So I know you guys meant that you couldn't fix that all that you. I know you guys meant that all the kids are possible. So in a genetic cross, this would not be a pedigree that they give you, or they said, "Hey, this problem is autosomal dominant." Now you go on. Does that make sense? This is where a situation where there's not enough kids to give us the information. Oh, okay. Okay, so this one here, what is your first thought? Recessive?
Yeah.
But if it's recessive, it could be sex-linked. What's the line? Oh, that was it. Could be sex-linked.
Could be, yeah.
Okay, so it could be sex-linked recessive.
It can't be sex-linked recessive because the male is carrying and the male is carrying.
What?
Oh, that's a female. Sorry, I misgendered. I didn't. I
Okay, we know that it's recessive. We know that, right?
Yes.
The other possibility would be autosomal recessive. Which one do we want to try first?
Sex-linked.
Sex-linked, okay? So, how do I know it's recessive? Guys, there's a carrier. Again, if you want to leave, please go. Now, this one here, okay, so
It must be recessive. Well, like that's.
Well, this one, okay,
Oh, yeah. Got confused.
this one. Now, this one here would have to be X little r because we're not showing that it's a carrier, right? This one, they show it's a carrier.
Why wouldn't it show them a carrier?
Because in a pedigree, if they show you one as a carrier, all of them would be colored in as carriers.
So does this mean that there's a better chance that it's autosomal? If it's not
Wait,
shown?
so, look up here.
Yeah.
10 should be a carrier.
Yeah.
Now, look at her kid. Now, her kid's got big R's. So she could be X big R, right? No, yeah, right? Where did this one get the big R from?
Mommy.
So, could it be sex-linked recessive?
Yes.
Yes, it could be sex-linked recessive. Why did I do that in...
Yeah.
I colored it wrong. Okay, let's try autosomal recessive. Okay, if it's autosomal recessive,
Oh, we can't do that because they're the carriers and it's not.
we can't do that because they should be colored in, right?
Oh wait, yeah. So we can't just color one in as a carrier.
If one is colored in halfway, then every carrier is colored in halfway.
So it would have to be sex.
So this one has to be sex-linked.
So if we only see that the females are colored in half, it's probably sex.
It's probably
Sure,
sex-linked.
can't the mom be heterozygous?
No.
No, because she's not colored halfway in. Okay. Dominant or recessive?
Say recessive.
Parent hasn't figured understood how to treat it.
So what? Should it be heterozygous?
Sex-linked or autosomal?
I'm not just saying.
This one could be sex-linked recessive. Why?
The
Daughter has it, her daddy has to show it. Again, probably not enough information to truly show it. Yes? Makes sense? Now, does it work, autosomal? Yes. If you answered either way, yes, that would be correct. Okay, this one here, dominant or recessive? Autosomal or sex-linked?
Yeah.
Why autosomal? Give me 2 reasons.
Because the males are carriers and the
I see no carriers.
Actually, no.
Most of the ones affected are females. That was my assumption.
And there's no.
Mostly the ones affected are females, and all the females who are affected, their daddies,
Oh, carrier.
they don't show the truth.
No, okay.
So it can't be sex-linked recessive.
It has to be autosomal.
It has to be autosomal. Okay.
Oh, because here the carriers aren't shown.
Wait, so the reasoning can be
Why did it show sometimes?
Why it can't be?
Yeah.
I think it needs to be.
The girl has it, her daddy does not.
Okay, got it. Oh, okay.
Dominant, recessive, autosomal, sex-linked. Recessive, why? Using proper terms.
Because the parents does not show it.
The first generation did not show us.
1 and 1, 2 do not show it. Yes, 2, 2 does.
It's not sexual. Autosomal.
Why is it autosomal?
Daughter has it.
Daughter has it, daddy does not. Dominant, recessive. Sex-linked or autosomal?
I'm gonna say autosomal.
I think sex-linked because the males are affected.
It's more common in males, it's probably sex-linked.
Is this fair? When we see heterozygous, it's almost always recessive.
If they mark a heterozygous, then it has to be a recessive because they're carrying the recessive allele. That means they have it, but they don't show it. Okay, this one,
This is a sex-linked.
this one. If you're in genetics, do not comment.
So why is there no mating?
This is asexual reproduction.
Really?
This is a problem. A girl is having 3 kids. No, stop. I put this up there into the pedigree without paying attention, and I was like copying and pasting. I'm like, this is great.
Oh, it's fair.
And so, and then I'm looking, I'm like, there's something wrong. Oh yeah. So I got there and just went, okay, so what's with the different colors? This case here, you might have to talk about like incomplete dominance or co-dominance. Oh no, we didn't. Because again, we stuck this one.
Would it be sex
Because what's the
What?
Would it be sex linked because it's sexual traits?
So, down on your exam, would we get
Okay, so the next topic we need to cover is karyotypes. If you want to learn it on your own, that's your choice.
no?
I am going to pass out the homework now in case people want to take off. Again, you take off, that's fine. I do not care.
I'm gonna learn about karyotypes. I'm dumb.
Okay. The homework, everything you picked up is strongly recommended. This is the homework. It's called the Blue People. Let's throw some free.
We've done this.
Now, before I release you to cover karyotypes, I do want to talk about the gene linkage and mapping assignment that is due on Tuesday. There is a typo on here that I need you to fix. So take this out. Gene linkage and mapping, it's due on Tuesday with the blue people. That's the 8th, right? I guess. If you turned in this sheet, I will give it back to you. Okay. So, okay, turn to the challenge problem. Turn to the challenge. For the challenge, the 677 should say one nose, small eyes. The 300 should say one nose, large eyes.
It's on the back. I've done it.
One nose bar back.
Okay, so that is the one fix you need to do. That 677 is small eyes, 300 is large eyes.
Oh shit, if it's larger for the 402.
Okay.
Okay.
So, at this point, if you want to leave, again, you're welcome to leave. I don't care. I'm fine. So, karyotype is a visual representation of one single cell's DNA. So, they take a swab of a cheek cell, and they take out one single cell, and that cell, they will go through all the different cells, and they'll find the best cell to look at, and they'll determine the gender, and they'll determine any major abnormalities. These are chromosomal abnormalities. Now, you need one single cell's DNA. Now, when would you see the visible chromosomes?
Oh, before they,
Before they, prophase or metaphase. Thank you. Normally prophase and metaphase. I guess you could use at the beginning of telophase, but you have to make sure that they have not started to decondense. Make sense? Now, we've already done karyotypes. If you think back to mitosis, we did karyotypes in like that Philadelphia chromosome assignment. So what they do is they take a picture of the DNA of one cell. They then they used to, and I used to have you guys do this, cut them out, arrange them in size so they find their pairs, and then arrange them from largest to smallest, and then put the X and Y at the end. How many autosomes do you have? 22 pairs. Careful. Good enough. Now, again, we are assuming that if you have the Y, you have the sorry gene. Sorry, you're male. SRY. Second time I've done that joke, and it's still good as the first. Okay. What do homologous chromosomes? What is a homologous chromosome? Identical. They're identical. True? False. They are not identical. Same centromere position. Same length. What, Pilates? They have the same traits, but can have different alleles, right? So they may have a dominant, they may have a recessive. As long as people don't destroy my classroom, Rana.
The amount of times I've done this.
Tell me when you're ready.
Ready? No.
I guess there was just a lot less.
I'll put it on that puzzle.
like the remainder.
Yep. And everything is going to be up on that puzzle. Videos are in class, so go.
Oh, right.
Okay. Diploid number of humans, 46 or 23 pairs.
I'm sorry, I have 47.
That's fine. What is chromatin versus chromatid? Chromatin is spaghetti and it's an interphase. Chromatid or condensed. Again, feel free to go. Seriously. This is a karyotype made of socks. Seriously, these are socks. Someone made this picture. I thought it was so cool. Just different pairs of socks. You too. Okay, to label a karyotype, you label it with the number of chromosomes, then with the gender, XX or XY, and then you add any abnormalities. So you count up the chromosomes, you say gender, you say any abnormalities. So most of the people in this room are 46XX and that's it. 46XY and that's it. There can be differences, you don't know. So, non-disjunction is the reason why those abnormalities show up. Remember in the tetrad, if the tetrad does not separate properly, right? And if 1 goes one way and 3 goes the other, then we're going to get 1 with 2 and 1 with 1, which is really hard to do with my fingers. I can't replicate that. Non-disjunction. Junction means to join. Disjunction is to separate, so this is literally not join. That just makes this one of the words in biology should be renamed. Okay, if you have 3 copies of a chromosome, it's called a trisomy. If you have 1 copy of a chromosome, it's a monosomy. This is I did not talk about in first period, Pilates. Monosomies most times are lethal that we know of. There is a monosomy X that's functional, but as much as we know, most monosomies are lethal. If you have a monosomy chromosome 1, it does not survive. Does not survive through pregnancy. Monosomy means only having 1 copy of a chromosome. I'll show you a picture in a second. Okay, remember chromosomes 1 to 22 are called the autosomes. Get in the zone, it's autosome every time. We know females XX, males XY. Okay, so this one here has 46 chromosomes, XY, so I'd label it as 46XY. This one here has 46XX, so it'd be labeled 46XX. Easy? Normal? Yes, keep going. Okay, this one here, how would we label it?
Plus 21.
So 47XX plus 21. This is called Down syndrome. Down syndrome means they have an extra chromosome 21. There is a huge range when it comes to Down syndrome. So in the next slide, I talk about some of the problems that are associated. Not in the next slide. This one. So there is intellectual disabilities. However, Down syndrome patients may be the most functionally normal, quote unquote, normal individual there is, or the most intellectually disabled individual. So there's a huge range of abilities for Down syndrome. And a lot of times it's how they're brought up and how they're cared for as youths. This one here. So it's 47. No. 47XY plus X. Why do I say it's XY? It has the Y chromosome, so it has to be a male. It has the SRY gene. That takes precedence. Why is this not really all that bad to the individual, though? Pilates? One of the X's always gets inactivated. So there are some, but overall, this is not the most dangerous mutation.
So in males, nothing gets turned off.
In males, they don't have X inactivation. So I'd write it 47XY plus X. This is Klinefelter's. There are some issues. Again, it's a range. Sometimes there is no issue whatsoever. Again, feel free to leave. You're not, you know.
It's a male, but without.
Well, it's a male because it's XY. Okay, this one here. Plus 13. 47. XX plus 13. This is called Patau's. About to get to an X0. So Patau's individuals, this is really sad. Most of the time they don't live past maybe a couple years old. They are normally born with like a cleft palate. This is not example of all cleft palates, like Joaquin Phillips. He was actually born with a normal face. He had an injury which caused that thing. Most kids born with a cleft palate, not necessarily is because of the test.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But we have to know which chromosome abnormalities are called like what?
No, but again, I want you to be exposed to them, and I want you to be able to read karyotypes. And in the blurbage of a test question, they'll say, trisomy 21 is Down syndrome, blah, 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 blah. This is what happened. Why? Same thing with AP tests.
Can we focus the other, any range of abilities? Maybe a few.
They're not going to ask you about, if they did, they would say that in the blurbage. They're not going to expect you to know these things. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Where's rocker bottom feet?
Rocker bottom feet is the feet aren't flat. They're, if my foot was like this and this is my top of my foot, it's like this. So I don't have a flat foot.
Yeah, those are technically fixed too.
Yes. However, most of the other issues, like the cardiac defects, will cause early death. Okay, this one here is a minus. So this one here is a 45x0 minus x or minus y. I don't know what it is. All I know is that this one here is a minus.
Would we just write X?
How I write this one would be 45x minus x0 minus x.
0.
There really should be a 0 because there's a 1. Now, if you write 45x0 minus y, it's still fine. Key thing is most monosomies are lethal. This one here is a possibility. Now, in this case, it may cause a thickened neck. So you have almost like a webbed neck.
Does that mean you're infertile?
So that means half of her gametes will not be able to reproduce, or they'll cause another Turner syndrome child.
Why isn't this individual like okay? Because it doesn't X interact.
Really, truly, normally there is a range of symptoms again. I've tutored students for AP Bio who were top-notch students, and you would not know. And I didn't know she was a Turner's patient until she mentioned. She's like, "Oh, I have that." I was like, "Oh, cool." So, anyways, the notes will be on Edpuzzle and on class. Have a good weekend. Thank you for those of you who stuck it out and were focused.
Have a nice weekend.
You too.
So for the, I'm missing X or Y from